You wake up this morning and you pray, not necessarily to a God you can name, maybe just to something, an intelligence, a force, a benevolent presence that listens. You've done this since childhood, and there's comfort in it, the comfort of not being alone in the universe. But what if that comfort is built on a misunderstanding so fundamental that everything you've constructed on top of it begins to crack the moment you see it clearly? Shankara, the 8th century philosopher of Advaita Vedanta, didn't attack your personal God. He didn't argue against devotion or prayer. He did something far more unsettling. He showed that the God you're praying to, the one with qualities, with preferences, with a plan for your life, doesn't exist in the ultimate sense. Not because he's denying your experience, but because he's pointing to something so radically different from what you imagine that calling it God becomes almost comical. Let me be precise about this. In most religious traditions, Christianity, Islam, Hinduism as popularly practiced, God is a being. A supreme being, yes, but still a being. He has attributes: omnipotence, omniscience, benevolence. He created the world. He sustains it. He has intentions. He listens to your prayers and sometimes answers them. He has a will that is separate from yours, and you're supposed to align your will with his. This God is a person, an infinite person maybe, but still recognizably a person, someone you can have a relationship with, someone who cares about you. Shankara said, "This is not the ultimate reality. This is a construction. A useful one, perhaps, for the mind that needs a framework. But ultimately, it's a thought superimposed on something that has no such qualities at all." What Shankara called Brahman, the absolute reality, the only thing that truly exists, is completely without attributes. In Sanskrit, they call it Nirguna Brahman. Nir means without. Guna means qualities, characteristics, properties. Brahman without any properties whatsoever. Not even the property of being good. Not even the property of being conscious in the way you understand consciousness. Not even the property of being. This is not a being. It's not a thing. It's not even nothing in the way you imagine nothing. As an absence, as a void. It's prior to all of that. Prior to existence and non-existence, because those are concepts, and Brahman is prior to all concepts. Now you might ask, how can something without any qualities exist at all? And that's exactly the right question, because it doesn't exist. Not in the way you exist. Not in the way the universe exists. Not in any way that your mind can grasp. The moment you say Brahman exists, you've already reduced it to something less than itself. You've given it the quality of existence. You've made it into an object of thought. And Brahman is not an object. It's not a thing that can be known, because knowledge requires a knower and a known, a subject and an object, and Brahman is prior to that duality. This is where Shankara becomes truly radical. If Brahman is the only thing that truly is, then what about the universe? What about you? What about your personal God listening to your prayers? Shankara's answer is devastating. They're all Maya. Not illusion in the sense of being false, but in the sense of being appearance. The universe appears. Your individual self appears. Your God appears. But none of them have independent reality. They're all modifications of Brahman, the way waves are modifications of the ocean. The wave thinks it's separate from the ocean. It has a shape, a location, a trajectory, But ultimately, it's only water. It never was separate. It never could be. Your personal God, the one you pray to, the one who supposedly created the universe, is also just a wave. A particularly convincing one, a particularly useful one for the mind that needs to imagine a creator, but ultimately just a thought arising in Brahman. Not less real than you are, not more real either. Both of you are equally unreal in the ultimate sense. And the universe itself, the cosmos with all its galaxies and laws and time and space, also Maya, also appearance, also a thought in the mind of Brahman, except Brahman doesn't have a mind. Brahman doesn't think. Brahman doesn't do anything. Brahman simply is. And even that is too much to say. This is the collapse that Shankara is pointing to. Not the collapse of your faith necessarily, but the collapse of the framework you've been standing on. The collapse of the assumption that there's a creator separate from creation, that there's a God separate from you, that the universe is a real independent thing that exists outside of consciousness. All of that, the entire structure, rests on a fundamental error. The error of taking appearance for reality. The error of mistaking the manifest for the ultimate. And here's what makes this so difficult to hear. Shankara is not saying this to comfort you. He's not saying it to give you a new belief system to replace the old one. He's saying it to point you toward something that cannot be believed, that cannot be thought, that cannot be experienced, because the one who experiences is also just an appearance. The personal God you've been praying to dissolves. The universe you've been living in dissolves. Even the you that's reading this dissolves. Not into nothingness. Into that which was never born and can never die. Into that which was never separate from itself. This is where we must stop, because anything more would be an addition. And Shankara's teaching is not about adding anything to what you already are. It's about removing the false assumption that you ever were separate from the Absolute in the first place. The God you imagined doesn't exist. The universe you believed in doesn't exist. You don't exist. And yet, something is aware right now. Something is reading these words. That something is not personal. It's not separate. It's not yours. But it's undeniably present. What is that? You're standing in front of a mirror. You've done this 1,000 times. You look at your face and you recognize it as yours. This is the person you call yourself. This is the one who prays, who suffers, who hopes, who fears. This is the one who exists in time, moving from past to future, carrying memories, anticipating what comes next. Now Shankara asks you to consider something that most people never seriously entertain. What if that person in the mirror doesn't actually exist? Not in the way you think, not in the ultimate sense. The individual self, what Sanskrit calls the jiva, the apparent individual consciousness, is not a separate entity. It's not a soul trapped in a body. It's not even a real being having a temporary human experience. It's a thought, a very convincing thought. A thought so convincing that it has convinced itself that it's real. Think about what happens when you sleep without dreams. There is no time. There is no world. There is no you. Consciousness is present. Something is aware. But there's no personal consciousness. There's no I experiencing anything. And yet, You don't cease to exist during that sleep. You simply cease to be a person. When you wake up, the person returns. The I reassembles itself. Memories reconnect. The sense of being a separate individual reestablishes itself, and you believe you've been continuous the whole time. But where was that continuity during sleep? Where was the person? Shankara would say, the person was never there. Only Brahman was there, and Brahman is there now. The only difference is that now a thought has arisen, the thought of being a person. And that thought is so compelling, so detailed, so historically rich with memory and anticipation, that you mistake it for reality. This is the fundamental error, not a moral failing, not a spiritual deficiency, simply a mistake about what's real and what's not. Now, if the individual self is just a thought, what about the world it perceives? What about the universe surrounding this person? Here's where Shankara's logic becomes almost surgical in its precision. The universe you perceive is perceived by a perceiver. That perceiver is the individual self. If the individual self is not ultimately real, if it's just a thought, then what it perceives cannot be ultimately real either. You cannot have an unreal perceiver perceiving a real world. The world must be of the same order of reality as the perceiver. Both are thoughts. Both are appearances. Both arise together in Brahman. But here's the part that most people miss. Shankara is not saying the world is false, in the sense that it doesn't exist right now, in this apparent reality. The world is real at its own level. The person is real at its own level. Your prayers are real at their own level. Your suffering is real at its own level. But there's a level prior to all of that, a level in which none of these distinctions exist, in which there is no world, no person, no God, no time, no space, no creation, in which there is only that which cannot be named, cannot be thought, cannot be approached through any concept whatsoever. That level is Brahman. And Brahman is not separate from this moment. It's not somewhere else. It's not in the future waiting for you to attain it through spiritual practice. It's here. It's now. It's the ground on which this entire apparent reality is arising. This is why Shankara said something so radical. There is no creation. The universe was not created by God. Because creation implies a creator separate from creation. It implies a point in time when creation began. It implies a purpose, a plan, a will operating in time. None of that is ultimate. All of that is appearance. The ultimate truth is that there is no creator and no creation. There's only Brahman, appearing as if there were a creator and a creation. The appearance is so vivid, so detailed, so logically consistent, that it convinces everyone who experiences it that it's real. But appearance is not reality. Think about a dream. In the dream, there's a world. There are people. There are events happening in sequence. There's a dreamer experiencing all of this. The dream is completely real while you're dreaming it. It has its own logic, its own laws of physics, its own cause and effect. But the moment you wake up, you see that it was never real. It was always just a dream. It never happened. There was no world in that dream. There was only the mind of the dreamer, appearing as if there were a world. Shankara says, your waking life is exactly like that. You're dreaming right now. The world is a dream. The person you think you are is a dream character. The God you pray to is a dream figure. And Brahman is the dreamer, except the dreamer is not separate from the dream. The dreamer is not aware of the dream the way you're aware of your night dreams, because there's no one to be aware. There's only the dream, dreaming itself. Now you might ask, if there's no creation, if there's no God, if there's no universe, then what is this? What am I experiencing right now? Why does it feel so real? Why does it persist? Why do the laws of physics work? Why is there order instead of chaos? And Shankara's answer is, you're asking the wrong questions. You're trying to understand the ultimate through the lens of the apparent. You're trying to use the mind to grasp that which is prior to the mind. You're trying to use concepts to approach that which is beyond all concepts. The moment you ask why, you've already stepped into the world of causality, the world of time, the world of creation. And in that world, there are answers, there are reasons, there's a logic. But all of that is appearance. All of that is Maya. The ultimate truth is not an answer to your questions. It's the dissolution of the questioner. It's the end of the one who wants to know. It's the collapse of the entire framework in which questions make sense. And what remains? Not something, not nothing, not anything that can be said or thought or experienced or understood. What remains is what was always there. What was there before the universe appeared? What is there right now, underneath the appearance of a person reading these words in a world? What will be there after all of this dissolves? Shankara called it Sat Chit Ananda, existence, consciousness, bliss. But these are just pointers. The moment you think you understand what these words mean, you've already missed it. Because understanding is a function of the mind, and Brahman is prior to the mind. There is no God listening to your prayers. There is no universe that you're moving through. There is no you that's separate from this moment. There is only this, only now, only the awareness in which all of this is appearing. And that awareness is not yours. It's not personal. It's not separate, but it's undeniably present. It's the only thing that's truly present. Everything else, the person, the world, the God, the time, the space, the meaning, all of it is appearance. All of it is a thought arising in that which cannot think. This is not a belief you can adopt. This is not a philosophy you can study. This is not something you can achieve through practice or discipline or devotion. This is what you are, before all your beliefs, before all your practices, before all your seeking. This is what you've always been.